What's up, NFL fans? Welcome back to another episode of For Your Viewing Pleasure. I'm Jeff Hartman, who also talks about the 3-0 Pittsburgh Steelers. And I welcome in Wesley Coleman, who now talks about the 2-1 New Orleans Saints. Wesley, how's it going, man? How was your weekend?
It's good. Still technically in first place, so I'm not complaining about that. I think we've got the conference record tiebreaker going right now,
There you
so
go.
it's early. So we'll take what we can get.
Yeah,
Must
and
be
in
nice
case,
to have two quarterbacks.
do the Steelers have two?
Yeah, don't you?
I've never seen the
Do,
other guy even
do,
play a snap
do,
yet.
do, it's either you have two or you have zero. I'm not
That's
sure.
true.
I'm not sure, but yeah, it's one of the two.
I think they have one. At least we'll put it that way. But we're not here to talk about our teams in particular. In case this is your first time listening on For Your Viewing Pleasure, this is crazy because this is where we turn the page. Week 3 is now in the books after the doubleheader on Monday Night Football. And now all of a sudden we're looking ahead at the Week 4 slate. Wesley, how in the hell are we in Week 4 already of the NFL season? This is what I hate, man. It goes too quick.
Yeah, we had a long off season. It's nice to be back, but man, I know Sean Payton always talked about the season being in quarters, and after week 4, I know there's 17 weeks now, but technically we're really close to one quarter of the season being done, and I think both of us are finding out that things that we started buying into too much with teams across the NFL after 2 weeks, you can't figure out anything in 2 weeks. Nobody knows what they're doing. There's a lot of it's going to be 2-0 teams and 0-2 teams that go the opposite direction. But I really think after 4 games, you can start believing in the things you're seeing a little bit.
Okay. That was my next question was how long do you think it takes? Some might say 3, some might say 4. Hell, some people say that they can't truly tell until week 7 or 8. And I get that because there can be a lot of things that can change. And this is why I hate when people talk about the schedule because this is a schedule show. They talk about when the schedule comes out in May, the murderer's row of X, Y, or Z team, and it's all based on last year's success, and it's not including potential injuries that can happen. And you can see already some teams are being decimated by injuries at very key positions. So you're saying that basically 4 weeks, and then you feel like you have a good beat on these teams.
Yeah, there's always going to be outliers. Not even talking about injuries. There's going to be outliers of teams that figure it out later in the year and get hot. There's going to be teams that fall off. A lot of times those are injury based, though. Outside of the outliers, I really think that 4 weeks in, you start getting an idea of not only your own team or a specific team, but also kind of the matchups versus other teams. You can kind of start having a better read on what potentially should happen, and then you can still be wrong about.
Absolutely. So let's start off the show. Must see TV, the games that you're looking at the slate in week 4 and you're saying, man, these games are going to be phenomenal. Pick one. You can have multiple, but which one are you looking at right now as must see TV?
I mean, I'm going to disagree with what I said last week. And honestly, I wrote off the Seahawks. They were actually Geno Smith's playing good. They're a good team. And I think the Seahawks Lions game that's going to end the whole week on late Monday night becomes a must-see game. One, we're going to find out 4 weeks in, or are the Seahawks a real team? Or, if they go to 3-1, that's still a good record, but who have they beaten? Also, the Lions, 2-1, easily could have been 1-2. Haven't looked like the NFC favorite that a lot of people peg them to be. I really think that we come out of this with the Lions 2-2 and the Seahawks 4-0. It flips over the NFC, early race, kind of flips it on its head.
I agree with you because the Seahawks are one of those teams, yes, undefeated, like you mentioned. But again, you go back and look at their schedule and like, well, maybe, I don't know. And this all comes down to as well, do you do the comparison after seeing a record? So do you look at, I'll give you an example because I'm a Steeler fan. I know their schedule. The week 1 win in Atlanta. Everyone originally said, well, that team's not going to be that good. But then Atlanta goes and they beat Philadelphia on Monday Night Football. And then they take the Chiefs down to the wire. And so then I tend to try not to be that guy, that fan that looks back and says, well, what's the quality of this win? A win's a win. Let's move on with our lives. But I agree with you about Seattle. I'm going to go with the Sunday night game. I think Bills, who just beat the doors off the Jaguars on Monday Night Football, they have to go to Baltimore. Baltimore, man, I'll ask you about Baltimore and what do you think about them because they went down to Dallas and they had a 28-6 lead and they let the Cowboys come all the way back and almost tie the game. What's your take on Baltimore at 1-2? And also, what do you think about this Sunday night matchup?
I really like it, and it's kind of that there's a few games this week, really 3 that stick out to me as like we're gonna find something out. You know, contender, pretender, if you want, like teams that are kind of already have a early losing record. Is it too early to say that? If Baltimore comes out of this 2-2 and beats Buffalo, then who cares that Buffalo's 3-1 and that Baltimore's 2-2? That's one game difference. They're gonna run into each other and play common opponents. And I think we're going to find that out. What I think we're finding out, one, is that Baltimore, their defense isn't as good as Baltimore Ravens defenses of the past.
Right.
And their offense is good. They've been consistent with scoring in the mid-20s. But I say consistent. They've done that in games, but they haven't been consistent. They've scored in quarters versus being able to sustain scoring throughout an entire game. I think that Baltimore is probably right now overrated. Or where it was overrated. I would predict Buffalo to win this game after the way they looked. Having said that, like, it's not going to surprise me either way. Like, I wouldn't bet the house on either one.
No, in Buffalo, they got ridiculed this offseason. People are like, what are they doing? Like they're shipping away all this talent. They're cutting guys for salary cap reasons. Stephon Diggs is gone. Jordan Poyer's gone. And then all of a sudden, they put together a pretty good roster, and they're starting to figure it out with the new offensive coordinator. And I was impressed with Buffalo on Monday night. I'm excited about this game. Do you see any other must-see games on the Week 4 slate?
Well, the other one that kind of sticks out to me again is, let's answer a question, is this Chiefs versus Chargers. Chargers are 2-1. A lot of changes to their offseason. Obviously bringing in the coach, and then going to change the system and go away from a passing offense with Herbert, which we got to figure out what's going on with him.
Yeah, that high ankle sprain.
But they are 2-1. They did lose to the Steelers this past week, and their 2 wins are against the Raiders and the Panthers that I don't know if anybody really cares. And then the Chiefs at 3-0, I'm not sure if they've looked particularly great in all 3 wins. They've had, 1-score wins against everybody. So kind of interested to see like an answer of that. Of one, can the Chargers get back on the winning streak? And this is obviously they'll play each other again this year. Yeah. But are the Chiefs going to get tested again, or are they actually going to come out and beat an opponent?
Justin Herbert's ankle is going to be huge, and going into the week.
You mean the swelling?
What?
You mean the swelling
in his high ankle sprain?
You said his ankle is going to be huge. Talking about the swelling, the size of it.
No, yes.
Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay.
Breaking news from Jeff Hartman. The ankle is swelling right now.
They averaged 197 yards per game going into week 3. But again, like you said, there's caveats to that. The Raiders are not very good. The Panthers are the Panthers, or at least they were at that time before Andy Dalton took over. And so you're looking at this and you're like, well, I don't know what to think of this Chargers team. So yeah, that's a good one. I like that game. In terms of who do we have, how about this? This is not must-see TV, but this is a game I wanted to bring up. Patriots at 49ers. Patriots are 1-2, and all of a sudden the 49ers are 1-2, and they have injuries all throughout their team. Brandon Ayuk seems to have forgotten how to play football. Deebo Samuel's hurt. Christian McCaffrey's hurt. George Kittle didn't play in the game. Nick Bosa's banged up. I mean, holy crap. This team's 1-2. And this is coming off of a Rams loss that was deflating. They blew a lead last week. And the Patriots are just kind of that team. I think they're going to be competitive all year. There's not going to be a lot of games where they get blown out. But still, what do you think about this one?
Well, if the 49ers come out of this game this week 1-3, and the Seahawks come out of it 4-0, that's a hole to be dug in with 2 teams that are going to play each other 2 times this year. So I just think that's a huge hole for San Francisco to be in, and it's going to turn right around these injuries. They play each other at the start of October, so it's not a long way off. If San Francisco's not done dealing with these injuries, again, heavy favorite. They're right there with the Lions of who's going to be the 1 seed in the NFC, and you're putting yourself in a pretty big hole with the Seahawks really early on. With the Rams and Cardinals aren't bad teams. There's not a bad quote unquote team in this division that can't compete with each other.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So let's switch from must-see TV to the fantasy lineup games that you wouldn't necessarily watch or keep tabs on unless you have players that are playing in fantasy for fantasy purposes. Are there any games that stand out to you in this one?
Well, I mean, the Bills Ravens kind of stays the game where you have the most players, I think, that are kind of getting in that discussion. Is Derrick Henry back to playable again? Lamar Jackson's putting up some numbers. What Josh Allen just did might have cemented himself as quarterback one as far as in fantasy right now, sitting out an entire quarter while having maybe the best game of his career. And then James Cook's been great for the Bills. I think you just got a number of people in this game that are, and not even mentioning Mark Andrews, which is tied in too. There's quite a few players in here that you're looking at and seeing how they do and how they match up.
Absolutely. I think that's probably the fantasy game of the week. But if you're looking at another game that could have some fantasy players at the Saints Falcons, that's a game. Obviously, you're going to be dialed into that one, but the Falcons have a lot of big name players. The Saints have scored a lot of points up until last week. But man, I should have probably save this for sneaky good matchups. But who would have seen the Vikings and Packers without JJ McCarthy, who is expected to be the starting quarterback, and without Jordan Love, who might be back this week? Sam Darnold, all of a sudden, now the 3-0 Vikings. I don't know. There's some fantasy players in this matchup, though, especially with the way the Packers are running the football. What do you think about that game?
There really is. I like to see it. Like you could, with the starting quote unquote quarterbacks out, like you can look at if you want to start the Vikings defense. If Jordan Love's not playing, you could even hop over to that side and see if you want to play them. But there's a running backs and receivers in this game that you've got to be thinking about starting for sure.
Yeah. So any other games or teams with matchups that you're particularly looking at for fantasy purposes that might be intriguing?
Well, I mean, the Rams and Bears, I mean, again, is just people. It's so many people that haven't. So you need to stop having their players on your team. Just like people you need to bench or maybe even cut and pick up replacements for, because whether it's injuries or whether it's just not producing, I think Rams and Bears are have some players that you probably were drafting a few weeks ago that don't need to be on your team anymore.
Yeah, I heard a conversation. I was at a wedding this past weekend and people were talking about fantasy and they were talking about like the 49ers players we already mentioned. They're like, they're screwing me, man. I took Christian McCaffrey first overall. I've got Deebo Samuel and they're all out of the lineup. So you mentioned, there's a lot of teams that are having this, like the Eagles and Buccaneers. You're looking at that game and you're like, hey, this could be decent. AJ Brown's still not in the lineup. Yes, Saquon Barkley's there, but Baker Mayfield's been hit or miss. Mike Evans is pretty consistent, but I don't know. This is interesting. So let's go to the next category. We always talk about sneaky good matchups, a game that you're thinking that the national narrative is not going to talk too much about this game, but at the same time, you could see this being a very good football game.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go with the Commanders and the Cardinals. Both of these quarterbacks, they're 2-1 and 1-2. Both of these quarterbacks have been fun to watch. The way that Kyler Murray is pairing with Marvin Harrison Jr. has been fun to watch. Trey McBride might have a concussion and may not be playing this week, but if he's in there, there's some good matchups on the offense. And then what Jaden McDaniel just set a rookie record and a Washington Commanders record for completion percentage in a game. And a really fun week 3 game with the LSU Bowl of Joe Burrow versus Jaden Daniels, where there was no punts in the game and no turnovers. Really, really fun matchup with those two quarterbacks. But I think this could be a fun game to watch of Washington versus Arizona with some exciting offensive players and maybe not a lot of defense.
Yeah. Who would have thought that the Commanders Cardinals would be a sneaky good matchup in week 4? But yeah, you're right.
I was talking about the Commanders. Now, I didn't think it would be this early, but when we started this, I said by the end of the year, I think the Cowboys and Eagles, the Commanders aren't going to be so far behind them.
You did.
I did say that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you credit for that. So I'm looking at sneaky good matchups here. I don't know. This seems like a very top heavy week in terms of some of these games. Eagles Buccaneers is going to be intriguing. It's in Tampa Bay, Philadelphia. They come off a win against the Saints, but I'm just still not sold on Philadelphia. I just think there's something off. I don't know what it is. People in Philadelphia are going to say it's Nick Sirianni. I'm not buying that. If he gets fired, I think he is just the ultimate scapegoat here in that situation. I think Saints Falcons could be a sneaky good game down in Atlanta because you mentioned it. There's a lot of implications in the division there. Both teams are coming off of really tough losses. What's your take on that NFC game?
Yeah, I think you can look at both of those teams and what they've done and convince yourself that either one of them is good or either one of them is bad.
Yes.
They haven't been consistent. The Saints had two of the best offensive games in NFL history to start a season, and then had less than 100 yards of total offense starting in the fourth quarter of this past week. And the same thing with Atlanta. Atlanta looked terrible and won a game. I mean, there's an easy way to look at Atlanta and them being 0-3. They probably should be 0-3. So it's somebody's got to win this division. We've talked about this for years now with the NFC South. I don't know who's good and who's bad between the two of them and the Bucks. I do have another sneaky good matchup.
Yeah, go for it.
Man, it may not be terrible to watch an Andy Dalton revenge game. I mean, listen, you're talking about 0-3 versus 1-2, and you just look at this on the surface. You go 0-3. Oh, the Bengals must be terrible. 1-2. The Panthers are one of the worst teams in NFL history last year and to start this year. But the Panthers just scored a whole bunch of points, and the Bengals did not force a single punt to a rookie quarterback this past. This could be a super high scoring game if Andy Dalton keeps it up. Now, it would be more fun if this game was in Cincinnati to see Andy go back there and kind of do this. But there could be some weird storylines and kind of fun things, and it actually might be a big offensive game.
I see your Bengals and Panthers, and I'd raise you a Jaguars Texans. If the Jaguars start 0-4, I think someone's getting fired.
Yeah,
I could see Peterson getting the axe and saying we're going to go with someone else. You just paid Trevor Lawrence all that money, and I saw on Twitter this morning, X, whatever we're calling it today, a side-by-side statistical comparison between Daniel Jones and Trevor Lawrence. It's the same thing, man. It is the same thing outside of the hair. It's ridiculous. And so both of those players are overpaid. We'll get that out of the way. But this game, the Texans did not look good last week in their loss. And the Jaguars, I mean, I watched a lot of that Monday night game, and then eventually I just stopped and said I had the dual screens going, and I was watching both games like, not watching this game. It's taking up too much space on my TV. I'm just going to start watching the competitive Commanders in Cincinnati game. But I swear to you, I think that if the Jaguars lose and go 0-4, I would not be shocked if Peterson's out. You agree or disagree?
Yeah, I mean, both of these teams haven't necessarily looked great, and I don't see how the Jaguars can win this. Even with the Texans struggling, the Jaguars look really bad.
Yes.
And they're not the only difference in those contracts. I mean, obviously, I think Trevor Lawrence is around $55 million a year and Daniel Jones around 40, but the Giants have escape clauses of how to get out of Daniel Jones's after this year.
Right.
Trevor Lawrence, you can't bench him. You can't trade him. You can't get out of that for, I think, at least 3 more years, concluding this one. That's a franchise killer. I didn't like that when it happened, but I'm sorry, $55 million a year for a guy that just is not an average quarterback. And we're basing this off of one comeback game 3 years ago in the playoffs is really what his contract is being based off of. And that's a terrible thing. He needs to fire the GM as soon as he fires the head coach.
Yeah, I don't think you keep one without the other. So we'll see how that goes. Let's go to our next category before the dud of the week, my favorite segment of our show, the dud of the week. But if you could only watch one, so you're looking at week 4 slate, someone says, listen, Wesley, you get to pick one game. We're keeping our fan bias aside, unless you think, like last week, a couple weeks ago, maybe you said that you thought the Saints game was the only game you would watch, even if you weren't a Saints fan. So who's that? What matchup is that for you this week? Could only watch one.
I really do think that the Commanders-Cardinals game is going to be fun. And I think with the struggles of the 49ers, if the Cardinals win, it's pretty interesting. And then with the struggles of the Cowboys, the Commanders winning, like either one comes out of that with a shot, at least early on at their division. And again, I just think it'll be fun. I think the quarterbacks will be scrambling. The quarterbacks will be running for yardage. There's going to be deep throws downfield. It's just, and not a lot of great defense. I think that could be a fun game.
Outside of Bills Ravens, which I already talked about, so I'm not going to talk about that again. I would say that I actually think it's interesting to see this Minnesota Green Bay game. I just think that there's so much intrigue, even if Jordan Love doesn't play. The Vikings and Brian Flores are doing things on defense that are not getting talked about a lot. They are stymieing the opposition. So Green Bay is basically saying, okay, we don't have Jordan Love, Malik Willis. We don't need you to throw the ball. We're just going to run it. Malik Willis had a great game last week. He led the Packers in rushing, I think, over 70 yards. He had a decent day throwing the ball. He's not turning it over. And then the Vikings, Sam Darnold, I think he had an MRI on his knee or something of that nature. And so we'll see if he's banged up. But this Vikings team is 3-0, and they're dominating everyone. And Green Bay, 2-1. This is going to be a game that if I had to just pick one just random game to watch, I would probably be intrigued by this NFC North matchup.
Yep, I think the Eagles Bucks is one that you just have to mention too, because you're two and one teams that sure. We don't know if they're good or bad and kind of how they done. We'll see what comes out of that too.
All right, let's do my favorite part of the show. Dud of the week, the game that you just think this game sucks. There's no redeeming qualities about this game because really when you think about all the categories we go through, must-see TV, fantasy games, sneaky good matchups, could only watch one. If you don't get in one of those, like you're potentially have a really crappy game. What game is the dud of the week for you this week?
So I'll say this. I think that it's a really obvious pick, and I think that it's wrong. Because I think 99% of people are going to pick one game and be like, yep, definitely, it's the dud of the week. I'm going to tell you the dud of the week is the Titans and the Dolphins. The Titans are terrible.
That's a good one.
The Dolphins are playing Skylar Thompson. This is not the game that everybody else will pick. Everybody else will just see the Dolphins and forget about what's going on there and pick a different game. It's the Titans and Dolphins. There may not be points in this game. I don't know. This is a really they're both have okay defenses. They're both the Dolphins haven't. They're supposed to have an okay defense. The Titans have had a decent defense, even though they're 0-3, and the offenses are struggling. So I could see this like seriously, first field goal wins. This is a Monday night game, and that everybody's going to turn that Seahawks-Lions game on in the first quarter when this game starts 45 minutes earlier. Everybody's going to the Seahawks-Lions after a very boring first 45 minutes.
So is this the game you think everyone's going to pick, or were you thinking?
No, this is the correct pick. Everybody would pick a different one.
Which one did you think everyone would pick?
The Browns and Raiders.
Yes,
you got the Deshaun Watson and Gardner Minshew. That's everybody would pick that, and that's a bad game. The Titans and the Dolphins is worse.
I agree, but I got to talk about Browns Raiders is going to be just a you know what show. I mean, it's going to be a dumpster fire of a game. I could see Deshaun Watson. He's just been. Well, we've talked about Deshaun Watson enough. He's just not that good. Like he's not that guy. Everyone's waiting for 2020 Deshaun Watson to show up. He's not showing up. I don't think so, at least.
No, but I'm going to just right here and say real quick that Deshaun Watson was a good quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah.
With what he did with a not great Texans team, he looked like a top 5 quarterback in the NFL that was elevating MVP candidate multiple times, multiple years. He looked like a super talented quarterback, and he was one of those guys. And I don't know. I know there's some injuries. I know there's some personal stuff. He's got a lot of stuff going on. He's not anymore. He is really bad.
Yeah. Again, it just makes this game more unwatchable. And I feel bad for Devontae Adams. I really do. Like, I mean, if they could get that guy out of there, geez.
Yeah, I think he might be a New Orleans Saint before the year's over.
Oh, okay. I
think Derek Carr, best friends. They went to college together.
That's true.
Orchestrated a way to get to Las Vegas together. And the Saints desperately need another receiving threat. There's a little bit of smoke already going on there.
There's another team that needs a receiver too. I don't know if you've heard about that or not.
Did y'all not close the deal on the Brandon Ayuk deal? Is that still pending?
No,
or negotiations still
that
hot?
case is closed. How about that, man? Like real quick as we end the show, how bad does Brandon Ayuk look? Like I thought I picked him up on my FanDuel lineup this week, just thinking he's probably going to be in game shape in week 3. Deebo Samuel's out. He proved you right 100%. What did you say? He is not a guy that can carry an offense. He needs someone else opposite him. And damn, I'm watching that saying, thank God the Steelers didn't make that deal.
He's one of the best players in the NFL when everybody on defense is distracted by Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel. He's when you lose either one of them, but especially both, it's just he is not that good.
Yeah. Devontae Adams to the Saints. Man, I never
Make it
thought
happen.
about that, but it makes sense. It's picking up steam, you said?
I wouldn't say it's steam. That's a smokish steam. It's not picking up anything, but I've heard it mentioned.
Okay, very good. All right, since you're a Saints fan, why don't you tell us what's going on with the Dome Patrol podcast and where people can find you on social media?
Yeah, so at Dome Patrol PCast on X, you can talk to me at Wesley13. We do have preview shows every week where we talk to people that cover our opponents, so we can get an idea from both sides of what it looks like. And we were all completely wrong about the Eagles and Saints, even the people that cover the Eagles. So none of us know what we're talking about yet, but maybe after 4 weeks we'll have it figured out. Jeff, where can people find you and get your Steelers coverage?
That you can find me on Twitter at jhartman, HARTMAN_PIT. Talk about a lot of stuff, sports, golf, all that stuff. And you can check us out at the Steel Curtain Network and steelcurtainnetwork.com for all our Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Wesley, man, as always, let's enjoy week 4, and we'll talk next week to preview week 5. Take it easy, my man.
See you next week.